Medicine burns when touched by fire. The smoke curls and spirals upward, and plumes of it rising, swirling, and pushing themselves in ribbons, higher and higher until the smell of it becomes the ancient aroma of blessing, teaching, and communion. Within its fragrant cloud, you can feel peace descend upon you. There is spirit here. You can feel it if you allow it. And that is the heart of the teaching, the allowing. Welcome to the Urban Grief Shamans. Grief protests and stirs within us a profound defiance against living a life filled with numbness. It emboldens wildness, and like a thunderstorm, untamed. And as we learn, grief is the prime emotion for the soul's vitality. Contrary to common belief, grief is teeming with life. It resists being gentle, and yet moves us so passionately. There can be no doubt this emotion springs forth from the wells of the soul. In our podcast, we will explore this defiance, embrace its wildness, and find peace within its untamed vitality as we live in the hustle of everyday life. Join Patricia Jones, a psychotherapist, and John Moyer, a retired paramedic, as we explore the spiritual side of grief. In today's episode, we explore forest bathing with Brenda Martin, a guide trained by the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. Brenda emphasizes that forest bathing is more than a walk in nature. It's an immersive experience encouraging a deep connection with the environment. This practice, rooted in mindfulness, yet is seen as being different from conventional hiking. Brenda's approach and philosophy underscores the importance of presence and sensory engagement to fully experience the therapeutic aspects of the forest. Brenda emphasizes forest therapy walks are accessible to everyone regardless of one's physical fitness. Brenda sees her role as facilitating invitations for participants to interact with their surroundings, making it personal and adaptable experience. Really, the essence of forest bathing is allowing nature to be the therapist, while Brenda is merely opening doors to personal experiences with the natural world. Good morning, Brenda. I'm speaking with Brenda Martin today, and we're going to talk about forest bathing. And we're going to just talk about how it started and how you got into this. So I was just wondering if you could explain for our listeners just what is forest bathing?
Sure thing. Thanks. And thank you, John, for inviting me onto this podcast. So when I got into forest bathing, I didn't even know that name, forest bathing. I was introduced to it because I was taking another course. It was during COVID, and there were all these online courses. And somebody in my session was mentioning that they were having training as a forest therapy guide. And I thought, well, that sounds really interesting. So I looked more into that. And my training has actually been through the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, which is based on Shinrin-yoku, which is Japanese practice that's been around since the 80s and is basically translated into forest bathing. So I think sometimes when people hear about forest bathing, they think they're going to take all their clothes off and, whatever, and jump into the leaves. And it's really quite different from that. So, the research shows that just spending time in nature is healthy. And there's a lot of research to support that. And that is not really my interest. My interest is more the experience of being in nature. So when I take someone on a forest therapy walk, the whole idea, it's so contrary to how most of us live our lives, that we're very goal-oriented. We're in our heads. We've got that noisy voice that haunts us sometimes and motivates us. It's not a bad thing, but getting into forest bathing or forest therapy is just a chance to slow down and have a relationship with nature. That's as simple as that. So sometimes when people come into my sessions, they think it's going to be a hike. It's going to be, they have to be really physically fit. But it's not. And I love hiking, but it's not a hike. It's very, very gentle. I would say a gentle stroll. And there's really no goal. Idea of nature and forest therapy is nature is the therapy, the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And the guide helps open the doors. So your individual experience with nature is what you're going to get out of the walk.
Mm-hmm. Can I just walk you back?
Okay.
To the paths that you take your clients on, your friends. Is it an established path? Are you walking through kind of a more pristine in the sense that people haven't walked along that aspect of the forests?
There are so many ways to do a forest therapy walk. Some people do it if you're in an urban area beside like one tree. So it's very individualized. For the ones that I do here in Southern Ontario, I have particular forest parks. Actually, these are conservation areas
mm-hmm.
that I feel very connected to. So before I do the walk, I spend time myself in nature and
mm-hmm.
develop that relationship, ask permission. The whole idea is that it's a relationship between humans and the more than human world. So when I go into that forest, I kind of get a sense of where I'm going to take that group. So I would never go into a forest therapy walk without first spending quite a bit of time that day, because even the forest
mm-hmm.
changes. Even when I use the same park, it's different every day. So I don't go deeply into the forest, and it's more very accessible for people with all kinds of different physical barriers. So I really try to make it a very gentle invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And if people want to, they have time within that walk to go further exploring. But to be honest, in Southern Ontario, you're not going to get lost in the woods. They're not.
You just
that
have to
big.
listen for the nearest roadway.
Exactly.
And clothing wise, just before we move on from that, shoes, what do they typically dress? Bug spray, I imagine, would be important.
Yeah, I usually recommend that they wear shoes. The place I most like to take people for the walks is along Lake Erie. So I ask them to wear, shoes that they can walk along on the rocks, waterproof, long pants. Because, we also, part of being a guide is being aware of any of the hazards that might be on the walk. For example, uneven ground, poison ivy, ticks, whatever might
mm-hmm.
be happening. So it's part of the guide's job to make people aware of maybe making sure they stay on the paths and stay away from those hazards. I'm also trained in wilderness first aid. So not that I've had to use it, because I really don't take people on treacherous walks at all, but anything can happen. So the thing is to keep people safe, dress for the weather in layers. There's quite a bit of time on a walk where you're sitting and not being very active. So just making sure you're going to be comfortable. I have little stools that we go out on if people want to use a stool. The walks are usually about 2.5 hours. So yeah, just to be prepared for that time, bring along a bottle of water, make sure you have your washroom break ahead of time and that kind of.
And some snacks, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any specific techniques or practices that a beginner needs to work on before they go out with you at all?
No, the whole idea of the walk is that it's absolutely for that person. It's their time. It's their time to take a breath and
mm-hmm.
maybe kind of cross into a little bit of a threshold of something away from their ordinary day. So as the guide, I feel that my job is just to hold space. A lot of the walk is about invitations. You have invitations for the participants that they can accept or not accept, of ways that they might want to connect with the forest or nature.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give them time to go out there and take advantage of that invitation or not. And then we come back, we have a time of coming back. And if they choose to, they can share, what they're experiencing in that moment or not. So it's not goal directed. There's nothing you have to achieve. It's just really being in the moment. And what you get out of that experience is very personal.
So what type of person is drawn to forest bathing?
I don't think there's any one type. Mostly it's people that have a sense that they really thrive being in nature and don't feel like they have enough time in nature, given their lifestyle, just all their other commitments they have in life. So it's usually people that have had either in their childhood or just have a yearning to reconnect with nature. So that seems to be the kinds of people that are attracted to it. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that come into my walks are people that regularly go out in nature, but they find that the forest therapy is different because it's very slow and it's not a hike. And a lot of people that go out to nature are hikers, and hikes are great. I've always been a hiker, but it's different. So, and it's also just for people that are searching or just interested in what it's all about. And you don't need a guide to go on a forest therapy walk. You can definitely do it on your own.
For sure.
But the thing is, the guide sometimes just helps you to not have to think about it. You can just kind of be in the moment.
Would you say that some are just missing something in their life and they're just not sure what it is? Like they're just searching, like for some spiritual connection or some kind of awakening of some sort?
I'm sure it is. And sometimes those things come up as we have our discussions after, like what they're experiencing. Sometimes things well up from like a loss, maybe that someone's experienced, or a person, or just, they're always surprised by, wow, when I saw that tree, it reminded me of, how fragile we are or how strong we are. Or so it's very, very, it's kind of part of the mystery of what makes the walks so powerful that you never really know what's going to come up. And sometimes people don't know ahead of time why they're drawn to it. I have to say, I can't see people not enjoying a forest therapy walk. It's just lovely. Although I have had people say, I don't like nature. I don't like bugs. I'm afraid of the woods. And of course, they're not drawn to the walks. So
when you begin your forest walk and everybody, I assume, just meets at one location in the parking lot and you connect at that point, do you do anything formal to open up your walk? Like in a shamanic world, we'd have a circle where we call in our ancestors or our protective spirits.
We definitely, first of all, after we've become acquainted and, I give them a little bit of information about where we are and the basics about the walk. We take about 20 minutes to do I guess you would call it a grounding exercise. And again, the whole thing is all about invitations.
My name is Pat Kim. My first forest bath, I think, was in the spring of 2023, and it was at Morgan's Point, Ontario. My first impression was that I was just going for a walk. What I became aware of in the first walk with the guidance of Brenda, who was the guide, was that it's really important to be present and to be aware of everything that's going on around you rather than just strolling through nature. Being aware and open to all the sounds, all the smells, all the different textures, and just being there with those trees and that grass and those skies and that lake. I think that hugging trees always means the same thing, but I think when I was encouraged to actually touch and listen to the trees and feel their bark against my cheek, that I realized that this is a living organism that I'm sharing this space with, and I hadn't really thought about that in that way before. I think it connected with me in a way that made me realize that I have to be very intentional about my interactions and very aware of the impact I'm having on my surroundings when I'm in it.
So it's inviting them to engage their senses, to connect with the land, to remind us of the human and more than human world that have been on this land. So we take about 20 minutes to just kind of slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And, but there are no particular, because there's no goal involved. If someone feels connected to an ancestor, that's their own experience with the nature. So the invitations are more open.
Mm-hmm.
We're not guiding people to kind of invite certain beings or ancestors or anything. It's just sort of, let's slow down and engage our senses. And then whatever happens from there is between nature and that individual.
Mm-hmm. If I understand you right, that there's no, in a sense, no priming for the possibility of encountering or experiencing a deeper aspect of the forest, like the different nature spirits.
And that's a big part of the training that I had during my training as a forest therapy guide. And it was hard for people because we had a lot of people like myself that have experience in counseling and other helping professions that are kind of used to, you're really going to, if you let yourself experience this, you could really have a connection. But we really had to kind of hold that back and let forest do its thing. So some people, might not get out of it that day what they hoped for. And others are surprised by what they do get. So it's kind of, as the guide, it kind of takes the pressure off because it's not, somebody asked me one time on a walk, what are you trying to accomplish? And I said, nothing. And he said, what is the goal of the walk? And I said, there is no goal. Oh, well, I kind of get it, But so I get that's the simplest way to explain it. It's to try to hold space. Like that's really my job. And that's why it's easier to go out on a walk with a guide than going on your own. Because having somebody hold that space for you allows you to really be in the moment. I think.
The idea of grief circles is that it provides a container for people to come in and share something deeper that they wouldn't otherwise. And so that witnessing aspect of it plays an important role. Do you think that there's kind of a witnessing that takes place when people come together and they're just like-minded and they can just be on this walk, but the idea that they're doing it with others as opposed to if they were just to go by themselves?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think as people share what they're experiencing, it often triggers something in someone else. And there is a sense of community often, not always, with the people on the walk. So, and sometimes it's people that already know each other and are part of a group that come on the walk, and sometimes it's strangers. So it's a little bit magical every time it happens because you just never know what's going to arise. And that's the beauty of it as well.
So when you lead them out of the parking lot and you're going down some trail, what would be like the typical experience? Can you take me on a virtual walk with you? You don't have to include lunch.
It's really interesting because a big part of the forest therapy walk is about noticing. It's invitations about slowing down and noticing. So part of connecting with the forest before I take the people on the walk is I'm noticing things maybe about the light or the dampness or whatever is going, the sounds, the birds, the whatever. So my invitations will reflect what I've kind of been noticing myself in that forest. So as you invite people to maybe notice the light, and then off they go, they might feel something. It might be completely about their senses, or it might be something emotional, or it might be a thought, or so it's whatever they're noticing in that moment. So it just opens things up for people to, I think we know what we need. We know what we need. It's just having that permission and having the force help us to recognize what we need in that moment. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
It does. It's almost by doing that, you're kind of giving them a choice to either allow something of accepting whatever the force or that place has to offer or not. But the important part is that they allow that an experience, just to be open to experience, I guess, is really what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I think that's why, creating a space that feels comfortable, where people feel like it's okay for them to say what's on their mind or feel something. That's the whole experience of the walk, is that it's a gentle, loving place. And it's not that the forest is, I'm not being overly romantic about it. Like, nature is awesome in every way. But to feel in that moment what it is that you need to feel, I guess, or that you allow.
When they're walking, do people tend to then partner up just because they can share with somebody, or does it tend to be still an individual experience through most of it?
That's a great question, and something I hadn't mentioned before. Really encourage people to be on their own and to experience nature in that moment on their own. That being said, these are all invitations. So you sometimes get, buddies that haven't seen each other in a while. And I guess they have that need to connect in that moment. So it's designed to be an individual experience of nature, but it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes people just can't help it. They just want to chat.
Moving along.
We have a little like a wolf call that I do to bring them back when the time's over. I try and encourage them not to, rely on their cell phones or timers and everything. So we have a little wolf call that if they hear me, they can wolf call other people, and then they come back. So yeah, they just kind of off they go. It depends on the invitation, and it depends on what's going on in the park or wherever I'm doing the walk. And, and life happens, and sometimes there's a lawnmower going on or construction. And so that's all part of the experience. And it's recognizing that humans have impact on the forest as well and nature. So you're not trying to keep people away from the reality of our lives. It's more, how do we integrate that, and how do we find something beautiful in that moment? That's really the invitation. I think it's like anything that you feel like, oh, I want to do that again. I want more of that. And nature, especially where we are, I mean, it's very developed here. There's a lot of urban sprawl. It's hard to, a lot of people crave being in nature. So I do get quite a few repeat customers. Yeah.
Do you have one favorite walk that sticks out for you that was just kind of blew you away, the intensity of it or the excitement?
They're all unique. Probably the favorite one I went on was when I was doing my immersive for my training. It was in Vermont, and we actually spent a whole day on our own in the forest. And that was pretty powerful. And I think I try in my little way on my shorter walks to hold that kind of space for people, because the longer you spend in nature, the more powerful that relationship is. Sometimes people go 2.5 hours. I don't have time for that. It's like, well, hurry up and relax. So I really try not to shorten the walks, but sometimes if somebody's not quite ready for 2.5 hour walks, I try to do something in an hour. So
listeners who might be listening to this or would be listening to this, and for some reason they find that they're being called to this idea of helping others to find something more by walking in forests. How would they go about becoming certified?
There's a lot of different training programs. The one I took is, it's online. The Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. When I signed up for it, you have a cohort, and we would meet online weekly for 6 months. And there's different activities as part of the training. The biggest part of the training for the training I took, which I loved, it was life-changing because you really embody these things. It's not just something in your head. It's actually embracing the whole idea of this invitational, experiential learning. And so, yeah, there are, and these things are springing up everywhere too. So that was where I took my training. And then you do all your exercises and practice walks usually with friends or colleagues to get that certification and write up about it. And it was quite a bit of work. Actually, it was great. And then after you become certified, you have to do a 4-day immersive. And they're all over the world. It's an international organization. And you do a 4-day immersive, and then you get your permanent certification. So, and all that is finding your own way, because everybody does their walks in their own way. But one thing we had in common was this whole invitation. You're not leading people to an experience. You're completely trusting the forest. And that's probably the overriding theme and the kind of training I had. And it's all about relationship between the person and the forest.
Could you expand a little bit more on the impact that it had on you when you first started the program?
I think as somebody who's trained in psychology, as I am, and I've done a lot of work in the helping fields, a big change for me was not feeling like I had to help people. I had to take some ownership of what the outcome was going to be. And it was very freeing. And it's actually helped me in my day job too, because as someone that continues to work in that field, just having faith that the answers that people are seeking are within them. And it's just having the faith that people will find their way. And if the forest can help, then that's great.
One of our focuses is on grief. Would you recommend forest bathing for people who are in the midst of grief?
Absolutely. And, without getting too philosophical about it, we all carry grief with us all the time. And I think as a culture, we're afraid of it. And sometimes watching a tree lose its leaves or whatever can cause a lot of emotion from people that can see themselves in that tree, sharing that experience or whatever. Wherever you are, you never know how it's going to affect someone. So I see forest therapy, forest bathing as a wonderful way to just the grieving part for sure, but just to be more whole and let more of our humanity in that we sometimes are afraid to share. I don't know if that is too out there to say.
Do you think it highlights the fact that we're being an individual is not necessarily the best perspective for people to have, but that they're part of something bigger, like a forest?
We're very individualized culture, but we're so interdependent. I mean, the world is small, and we are part of a big, beautiful, crazy, complex world. And I feel myself, my own personal philosophy is the more we recognize that, the more we feel our place within it and it's humbling in a good way, because we're not that big a deal. We're all part, and it's freeing not to have to carry the responsibility that most of us do.
I love the fact that you speak of relationship, and that's always been my experience when I knew an individual and for some reason they didn't impress me by their behavior or whatever. And so there's no, not having that relationship, it allows us to be very different from each other. But the idea of having a relationship, which has been the case in my experiences, when all of a sudden, for some reason, I enter into a relationship with that person as an example, then you understand there's so much more to that person than that little moment that I captured and formed from my own biases, that individual. And I think that in nature, when we take a look at our forests or parks, that the greater the relationship that we have with that, the more we care about that. And the more that we want to improve the conditions of our forests, of our waterways, is that when we have a relationship with a river, a brook, it just makes us want to do more for those beings, those non-human entities. And at the same time, we want to do more for each other, because we understand that idea of respect is very important in all relationships.
Yeah, that's so well said, and just I guess it is a respect. It's a respect for all life, and our place within it, and to do what we can to. It's hard to come to be in nature and just not see the beauty and magnitude, mystery, and it's so big, and not want to care for it, and not want to care for life. And every little bug that you see, or any little leaf that you see, and the beauty of how these things grow and die and live, and it's just a wonderful embrace of the mystery, and it's something that we all share. We all live on this beautiful planet Earth, and we're all part of it.
Well, I think, Miss Brenda Martin, this would be a good place to end our conversation. Well said. Thank you so
John.
much for agreeing to be on our show here.
Much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, you're quite welcome. We'll talk again.
Okay.
After my conversation with Brenda Martin for this episode, I found myself wanting to know more about the organization who had trained her. The Association of Nature and Forest Therapy, or ANFT, is a community focusing on nurturing guides who lead others into the world of nature and forest therapy. As of last year, they trained 2,400 guides spanning 66 countries, including healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, psychotherapists, and yoga instructors. But ANFT isn't about turning them into therapists. Instead, it's about enhancing their practices by adding the unique skills and knowledge that comes from embracing the way of the guide. As Brenda Martin emphasized, forest bathing is a serene immersion into nature, where each step becomes an opportunity to connect with the environment. Unlike hiking, it's a slow and mindful journey. You absorb every sensation, the gentle breeze on your skin, the harmonious melodies of the brook and birds, and the rhythmic dance of the trees in the wind. Forest bathing isn't about reaching a destination. It's about being present and fostering a deep connection with nature. Relational forest therapy is like a journey of self-discovery, helping you remember who you are and your place in the grand tapestry of life. Contact information for the ANFT is in the show notes. Thank you for joining us into the world of shamanism and its connection to grief, healing, and spiritual growth. If you have enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe to the Urban Grief Shamans. If you have any questions or wish to delve deeper into these topics, we warmly invite you to connect with us. Your comments and support are deeply cherished. Until next time, may you find grace and insight into your own spiritual journey.